Okay guys, so in this video we are gonna look at supporting showing missing translations, so let's get into it. So this one is probably gonna be short and sweet, so all I did was to add these two numbers here that just represents how many keys we have of each. So if I, for example, go here and I change that to 0, you'll see that, or I'll set it to empty, it's gonna go down. And I mean, I can do the same thing here, but that doesn't really make any sense. So like adding that in is going to update it, and adding that in is going to update it. So here we go. And the way that we do this is pretty much all client side. So I've made a few updates, and we can see here that there is a bunch of stuff that happened in the language component. As you can see, this was kind of basic in the beginning, but now we have quite a few things going on here. So basically I added just a span here with some CSS. We can actually just look at that CSS very quickly. Some basic styling, and then pretty much all that's going to happen is that we are going to go to the context and get our translations. So we wrap this in with app context function. And then we're going to reduce, and because what we want is to convert our translations into a number that represents how many keys from whichever language we're interested in is, how many we have. And then we instantiate that with a 0. And here is our function. So basically all it's going to do is it's going to be a higher order function, which is going to take in a language, and it's going to return a reducer function that takes an accumulator, which is going to be a number, and an item, which is going to be a translation. And then we're simply going to add the accumulated number to a filter that we go and where we filter over the translation for each translation, and it's like the values of those. And then we're going to filter out everything that is equal to the language that we have provided and is defined, so that we get all the language, like all the keys for each language, and just the ones that have some truthy value on our text, so that if it's an empty one, we don't count that as a count. We don't count that. And then we grab the length of the resulting array. That's about it. And that way we can construct these two functions with this higher order function. So we have one function that is going to count how many translations with the value we have for English, and one for Swedish. And then we pass that into our reducer. And that's pretty much it. So that's where we get our number. And then I had a few updates here to the translation value. Let's actually look at that. So I made a few updates here because I noticed there's a few things that I didn't like so much that I did in the last one. So if we have a look here, we'll see that I updated I changed from using the props and the translation text that is going into the props to just using the state, because I actually realized that, hey, I actually do have these props here. So like, why I might as well just, grab them. Like, I have the value here, so I might as well just use that value directly instead of using the props. And I also noticed something that I didn't think about earlier, which in the previous video, where I actually did something that's very bad, which is this thing here. So what I did basically is that I did structure out the reference to the props, or the translation text on the props, and then I do an equality check here. And then I do this, which I shouldn't have been doing, which is basically that I mutate the translation text and set that value to something else. This is a big no-no, because now I'm actually mutating a property that is being passed in, and that's not what I want. What I want is to copy or clone this value, but I'm actually not doing that here because I still have the same reference. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't do that. So what I did here is that I created this little clone method on my translation text model, and then I clone, and I get a clone, and then I set that value to the provided text. And then I pass the clone into our update translation text and make a network call, and once we made this update, I actually go and get all the translations again, and then I set them to force a re-render of the page, so that we can actually cascade this update up to the languages component, so that it actually understands that, oh yeah, we have a bunch of keys that have been updated. We could have done this all client side as well, but I prefer to, since it's like this is an application that is not going to have all that many users. Even if it were in a production environment, it doesn't really matter if we make an extra network call and just refresh the state. I mean, this is going to be the source of truth. So ideally, I mean, if we wanted to micro optimize this, we would have done it all client side. But I think that this is good enough for now. And then we wrap this in an app context. That's awesome. So the thing that changed on translation text is basically this. A slight improvement here. I noticed that I didn't actually console log an error, which I wanted to do for whenever somebody tries to input a language that isn't supported. That's just a little bit of extra fluff to make sure that we capture errors. And then I did this, which is just this is the whole clone. All it's going to do is that it's going to create a new instance of translation text and pass in the current reference to this object. And as long as all these keys represent like this constructor will extract the same keys and apply them to the instance, that this is going to work. So this is our way of like cloning something. Fairly straightforward, I hope. So that's pretty much it. It's a simple implementation, but it's very effective. So whenever somebody logs in now, they can see how many keys they have of each language, and if they actually need to do some more work and like translate something. So that's gonna be it. We're gonna call that done, and next up is gonna be to support label filtering, which is gonna be something like this. We're gonna be able to actually list our labels and filter based on those labels. So let's have a look at that.